I hope you caught what she was doing for us at Meadowlark Media and Apple with Brendan Hunt. He plays Coach Beard on Ted Lasso. She's the co-host of a podcast that was during the World Cup, After the Whistle, with Brendan Hunt and Rebecca Lowe, and she hosts the NBC's Premier League coverage right now. Thank you for joining us. The first thing I wanted to start with, what are the things about your job that are more difficult than people understand, that the prep involved, people who think you can, a broadcaster can just show up and be an expert about things without preparation?
You talking about me?
Hello, guys. First of all, thank you for having me on. What an absolute pleasure it is to be on your lovely show. I would say probably, and it would be the same with all sports broadcasters, and probably if you're a news broadcaster as well, is that you're never really off the clock. I mean, literally never, because the Premier League, I can't speak for NFL, NBA, but I would assume that it's pretty similar, is an ongoing soap opera of storylines. And if you miss out on a couple of days, you think, I'll go take a couple of me days, a couple of spa days, I'll come back and read up on everything. You have missed about 25 storylines. So for me, I'm never off it. Whatever spare time I have when I'm by myself, I have a podcast on or a sports radio chat show on or something just to keep that ticking over, because it never ends, guys, being in sport, does it?
Is it joyous or is it obsessive, compulsive burden? You'd like to throw some of your devices in the sea because life will not slow down?
I think on the whole, it's joyous, and on the whole, it's a habit, and it's a habit that I enjoy, so I'm okay with it. But there are times, and actually, usually, not this World Cup, because as you say, I was doing the podcast with Brendan, but usually during a major tournament, because NBC don't have the rights, that is actually a time where I don't have to tune into Talk Sport Radio 24/7. So that's normally a time where I get a bit of a break and I can throw the phone down. But not this past World Cup. I was in it more than ever. So it's kind of non-stop at the moment.
When you tune into sports radio, I'm curious here, what shows are you tuning into? Like, who does Rebecca Lowe like in sports radio?
Okay, well, guys, probably nobody you've ever heard of, because it's all from across the pond. On the whole, there are not a huge amount of Premier League chat shows in America.
Did you think she was listening to
Mike and the Mad
Colin
Dog?
Cowherd?
Maybe she does.
You think she was tuning into American
Let her
television?
answer.
Okay, all
And
right.
by the way, I will go across the pond and I will dominate England sports radio.
You will.
Yes.
You will.
I'm thinking about doing
there's
it.
There's nothing like you guys over there. So, they always talk about English people cracking America. I feel like you guys could definitely crack England. I know it's not quite as sexy as cracking America, but I think you could do it. I basically listen to Talk Sport, which is the only commercial. Can you believe this? It shows how small England is. It is the only commercial radio station solely based around sport in the whole country. And so it's nationwide, so it covers all areas of the country, all teams. And obviously in England, we don't have a ton of different sports. I mean, we do play cricket, we do play a bit of rugby, but on the whole, we're football. So 90% of what's talked about on Talk Sport Radio is football, because that's what happens in England. It's all about the footy.
Your career choice and career path, did you have options once you are the daughter of BBC News presenter Chris Lowe? Like, how does that work? Like, is it chosen for you and what it is that you're witnessing growing up, and you're just like, this is what I want to do. This is in my family blood. I want to be talking, or I want to be presenting things to people.
Nope, not at all, guys. Funnily enough, watching my dad read the news growing up, it never occurred to me in a million years that I could be on TV, would want to be on TV as a newsreader. It was much more the other way. My mum was an actress. That's what I wanted to be. So that's what I trained to be. That's what I was going to be, or certainly going to attempt to be. That didn't happen because I ended up winning this competition at the BBC, but we didn't tell them who my dad was, because in those days, reverse nepotism was a thing. I mean, nepotism's always a thing, but this was very much, the BBC were very reverse nepotistic. So I did not want to tell them who my dad was. Otherwise, they wouldn't have let me win the competition. So that was all a big secret.
You're talking about the BBC's television talent search, right?
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
You won that. And how hard was it to win that? How many people are involved in that?
I think it was about between 500 and 1,000. It wasn't loads, but for me, who wasn't a trained journalist and really just loved football, soccer as a hobby, and as a female in 2002, I was very rare with that. So it was quite difficult to win it. You had to go through a number of journalistic rounds where, like, write a match report, send it in, call a phone number, leave a match report on a voicemail after watching a football match, and then eventually getting to the final, which was at the headquarters of the BBC, 7 people in the final. And then it was a case of, again, some journalistic things, some things to camera, interview some people on camera. And then they called and said, you won 6-month contract at the BBC. And I was like, oh, but I was going to be an actress. And I thought, yeah, you don't turn down the BBC. That's what you don't do in life.
And so as a football presenter, that made your path, right? You win the contest, you do it for 6 months, and you're like, okay, never mind. I'm not going to be an actress. This is my path.
I think it was more that once you're in the door of somewhere like that, it would be churlish and probably foolish to leave. It would be like winning a 6-month contract at ESPN when you really like NFL, for example, straight out of college. And then after the 6 months, even if you don't think you're very good, leaving. Like, you just leaving would be a big thing to do, to leave an ESPN. Same thing with the BBC. So I didn't think I was very good. I found it very difficult. I did not think that this was going to last very long, but I also knew I could be an actress at any stage, guys. So let me see how far this craziness, how much they want to employ me. I mean, really, do they really want to employ a female in 2002 to talk football? They did. I stayed, and the rest is history.
Whitty, why are you glowing?
Oh, the use of the word churlish. It's one that I need to incorporate in my daily language. I love that word.
Please do.
You'd also have to be an idiot to leave ESPN. I think we can all agree with that.
Yep.
So I'm curious, and again,
Wait, no, Rebecca once worked for ESPN. That's not about you.
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
Yeah, that wasn't about you.
About us.
That was
Yeah.
self-deprecation.
Okay.
Yeah.
yes, that was about us leaving ESPN.
Well, you.
You left too. I mean, you also left.
I did, because you left.
She is the host of NBC's Premier League coverage, and I'm wondering if you, like me, believe that the greatest story of all that World Cup coverage that you were doing was not, in fact, the great ending and punctuation, but Salt Bay being on the field after that, which it truly enraged me in a way. I'm still enraged with the unearned fame of that guy grabbing and bothering Messi at his biggest moment in a silver suit.
It was sickening, wasn't it? Sickening. And it drives me nuts. But it all came around with some relationship he had with Infantino at FIFA. And, there's just stuff that needs to be sorted out. Let's be honest, all right, at FIFA. We need to sort the place out. And the friggin' chef was the sort of encapsulation of everything that needs to be sorted out.
You're being very gentle there. Come on. You can't. The strongest commentary you have on FIFA can't be we have to sort some things out there.
Sneeringly calling him the chef is a great way to...
I mean, just the whole thing, though. All of it with FIFA. How is all of that allowed to be? Explain to me how in plain sight we can have the most corrupt thing in the history of corruption, at the height of corruption being more allowed than it is anywhere else. I work with Stugotz, for the love of God.
Well, thank you.
I'm mortified by FIFA. How is that allowed to exist in its present state?
Because not enough people are willing to pay the price to stand up and say no. And when Qatar originally got the World Cup, guys, 12 years ago, people said no in print, they said no on telly, but nobody actually formulated a working group to push back against it. There are the kind of the people waving the flag saying, well, no, we are anti this, but no one's actually in positions of power enough of them to push back. So we had Sepp Blatter and all the corruption that came with him, and now we seem to have moved on to Infantino, and it doesn't seem to have got a lot better. I mean, how about the selfies he was taking in front of Pele's coffin, by the way?
Oh, no. I didn't even see that.
You don't want to look up that.
Yeah,
don't look it up.
Not Salt Bay, Gianni Infantino. Although if Salt Bay were taking his selfies next to Pele's coffin, that would have been extraordinary.
Pouring
I thought
salt.
It was Salt Bay. Holy shit.
I
What
totally thought
a
that, yes.
clarification.
Pouring salt on. It is so universally enraging. I don't. It really was something to marvel at, the idea that the soccer would be that good at the end and that people would get just forgetful. As you'd have to consistently put aside your ethics here to understand that you're celebrating a profoundly corrupt entity winning. And I'm not even talking about Qatar. I'm talking about FIFA.
I know. And it's trust me, as somebody who works in this sport and who loves it dearly and wants to try to continue to spread the word in this country about it, it's not bloody helping. Can I just tell you that? It's not helping. So to go back to what I said, we need to sort it out, but people with a lot more power than me need to step up and sort it out and push back and prevent Infantino from continuing down the road that the previous members went down.
But isn't the ultimate conundrum is that we won't stop watching?
They know it.
We didn't. I watched the World Cup. We all watched the World Cup. People who love football watch the World Cup. Like they have that power over us, which is we love this thing.
But I feel like that's sort of like governments. I mean, governments, none of us stop working. We all stop doing things, and governments are, not always above board, are they? And yet here we are still doing everything in our country for our country. And I think that's just the case. Yeah, you're absolutely right. They have a precious commodity that we're all obsessed with and know that we will come back no matter what. And ultimately, that's what happened with Qatar. Because when it was announced, everybody was like, no. Oh, but the games are going to be great. We've got to talk about football and Messi, and it could be his last World Cup. And that's what happens. Football is intoxicating, and it's kind of a problem.
What is the story behind your American citizenship?
By the way, I love how you just jump from subject to subject without even like any kind of segue. It's literally amazing.
That's how we do it.
Transition.
It's my favorite. The background to the citizenship is my little boy was born in America, and it can get complicated. Number one, if your child is born in America and you're not, and I got nervous with all the different rumors people were telling me about things could happen. So I'm like, okay. But secondly, also, we've been here nearly 10 years, my husband and I, and it does feel like home. And we want to be able to vote. We want to be able to have our say on things. We're talking about, not try to kind of make good choices and contribute to this community and to this society. And it's an important place. We're raising our child in a country that if we don't get to vote in it, it's harder, So that was part of it. And the other thing is we love the country. We love, of course, there's many things wrong with it. There's many things wrong with England, but we love the United States for so many reasons. And why not, if you can, become one?
How far do you think you could throw an orange?
Great question. Great question.
Oh,
had to be asked.
How
really
far?
How many yards? If you had to put we're going to do this at the end of the show. Greg, Cody, and Stugotz are going to go and try and throw an orange, and they think they can throw it many yards. How many yards do you think is a reasonable guess on how far you'd throw
Are you counting where it lands or where it ends up stopping moving?
No, it can roll. It can roll. The end of the rolling and everything.
And definitely an orange, not a Satsuma or a Mandarin. I just want to get
Your standard orange.
Or navel.
No, I love all the follow-ups.
Showing to the camera here, I've actually procured the oranges.
I can see it.
That we're going to be throwing later.
Well, if it was, I've got a decent arm. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to tell you that I reckon I could throw it until it stops moving. 50 yards.
Wow.
Okay. So 50. I believe she could throw it 50 yards, but Jessica believes she could throw it 100 yards. She believes she could throw it twice as far as you. She thinks it's going to be fairly easy to throw it 100 yards.
And I think you could throw it 100 yards too, or stones, whatever British people say.
I think rolling it might be right.
Stones.
How many meters is that?
Yeah, I think rolling it might be the better strategy if we're just going to go on roll. No, I can roll it like 100 yards.
Like a bowling ball?
Bowl it up there.
Yep. Strange question. I apologize. Do you know who the quarterback of the Buffalo Bills is?
Is it Josh Allen?
Thank you very much. And do you know the team in the NFL that every single year since the beginning of time has played on Thanksgiving Day?
Is it? I don't know.
Okay, 1 out of 2 is fine.
It's also unfair the way you asked the question.
Why?
Because it wasn't. If you'd ask her, do the Detroit Lions play on Thanksgiving every day? Did you know that? That would be a fairer way to ask the question than to ask if she can name the team.
Sure, I even knew the Detroit Lions was an NFL team.
I
thought it could well be maybe an NBA team, to be quite honest with you. I'm not brilliant at my NFL teams, Some of them fine, some of them like the Texans, and I'm just not good on
Basically,
some of them. So I'm glad you didn't ask
the
that.
ones that aren't on Sunday Night Football because you're not reading the promo for it.
I was going to say, that's what I was going to say, Chris. I don't think I've ever read a Detroit Lions tonight on Sunday Night Football promo.
That's the reason.
Let's keep it that way.
Yeah, that is actually
They
why
have never
that,
been on
that's
Sunday Night
correct.
Football.
That's why that would happen.
And the Premier League has been on NBC for 10 years, and during that
Correct.
time, the Detroit Lions have never been on Sunday Night Football.
The reason for the question, just so that you know, we were talking about in order for a media person to truly be expert on their subject matter, sometimes some of those experts have to be lopsided and can't pay attention to everything in other sports. That to be expert in one field, really expert, accomplished, makes it hard to be expert in a lot of other fields.
Without a doubt. And actually, that's why I find it so interesting in this country that there are people in my industry who are across. I mean, Mike Tirico, for one, can tell you so much about a bunch of sports. Bob Costas, of course, another. And I'm like, literally, I spend my entire life listening to Premier League and reading about Premier League. How on earth do you find the hours to spread that amongst all of these sports? But somehow they do. I'm just not built in that culture. Our culture in England is pretty much one sport. So that's kind of all I can do. I'm basically a one-trick pony, guys.
Do you guys know if you're going to continue to do some version of After the Whistle with Brendan Hunt and Rebecca Lowe? Did you have enough fun that it's something that you might continue to do in some form, even though the World Cup games are over?
We had loads of fun. In fact, I did call him on Friday. He said, give me a call. So I called him. Then he's got flu. So I'm waiting for him to call me back. I don't know is the answer to that. But I think that we had enough fun for there to be a future.
Rebecca, tomorrow, the Premier League has a massive game. Chelsea hosting Manchester City. Coverage will be on Peacock. Right now, Manchester City are the favorites to be the Premier League title winners. Or are they still? Because Arsenal have had such a good season despite their 0-0 draw with Newcastle yesterday. How do you see the title race as it stands right now?
If you'd asked me this yesterday morning, I'd have said Arsenal are now favourites. But just with that dropping of points yesterday, as you mentioned, against Newcastle, and the way they dropped them in that Newcastle kind of bullied them a little bit, threw in a bunch of physical tackles and things that they were kind of disrupted their flow, it might end up being a blueprint for how to disrupt Arsenal's flow moving forward, which would really be music to the ears of Manchester City fans. I think whenever you have Erling Haaland in your team, who has more goals at this stage of a season than anyone in the history of the Premier League, you are always going to stand a chance. So I think that City on the whole, especially with their pedigree, guys, of 4 titles in the last 5 years, are still just about favourites.
Rebecca, you mentioned earlier soap opera storylines in international football. I wonder, do you think Ronaldo has buried his legacy under an avalanche of notorious cash by signing with an otherwise obscure Saudi Arabian club?
Well, I just saw the headline. Did you see what he said when he was unveiled? He said how he's got a lot still to offer here in South Africa. And I'm like, mate, what are you doing? Like, how can you get that so wrong? How can you go to Saudi Arabia?
You got to be kidding me.
South Africa. So number one, don't think the legacy is going to continue much in Saudi Arabia if he's calling it South Africa. I do fear that his legacy has been tarnished with his behavior internationally and at Manchester United. And it's a great shame because when you say Cristiano Ronaldo right now, to most people, you're thinking petulance, you're thinking attention seeking, you're thinking financially greedy, you're thinking all the kind of negative things. Whereas this guy was a magician, is still to an extent a magician and a genius, and one of the greatest players that's ever walked the earth. But his behavior over the past 2 months has been so disappointing. I look at it now through the lens of being a mum, and I show Cristiano Ronaldo to my 6-year-old boy who loves him, but I show him the behavior of storming off down the tunnel and just behaving the way he behaves and not being graceful in defeat. And I don't want my son to look at that as an example. And so for me, he's out for me.
Oh, wow. He is gone. Can you explain to us here, last item, I see that Gregg Berhalter had a very long statement, the U.S. coach, about kicking his now wife 30 years ago in an argument they have that was being investigated. The statement was all about their relationship and how it was something that was, teenage behavior from 30 years ago, but it's being investigated. And the statement is necessitated because not only is there an investigation, but he's clearly under it and wants to explain context.
No, there was an attempt at blackmail. which was mentioned in the statement.
That's right.
What do you make of this story?
It kind of blew my mind when it broke yesterday, and because it came from Gregg Berhalter's personal account, which isn't verified and has like 100 followers or something, it took a few minutes to work out whether or not it was legitimate. And then when US Soccer retweeted or whatever they did and made their own statement, we were like, whoa, my God. I could not believe Berhalter's statement, the detail in which he went in, the sort of man doth protest too much, kind of enough, like too much, mate, too much. What goes on in his marriage? You know, he was 18. I mean, he was a child. Not that that's any defense in any way, shape, or form. And to anyway, that whole situation is a mess. The blackmail is, unfortunately, in this day and age, not particularly surprising. In the middle of a World Cup, somebody wanted to take him down. What confuses me about everything is that his contract was up last week. So I don't really know what US Soccer has to do with Gregg Berhalter anymore. They haven't renewed his contract, and his contract expired at the end of December 2022. Can they not just wash their hands of him and move on? I don't really understand that side of it. The whole thing is a mess. It's a terrible look. They need to move on from it ASAP.
She's the host of NBC's Premier League coverage, and we hope there will be further forms of After the Whistle with Brendan Hunt and Rebecca Lowe. Thank you, Rebecca, for being on with us. Good talking to you.
You guys are the best. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.